Las Vegas, 1974. During Elvis's show, a drunk martial arts champion stood up and shouted, "Your black belt is fake! Prove you're a real fighter!" Security moved in. Elvis stopped them. What happened in the next 4 minutes turned a hostile challenge into the most legendary demonstration of humility and skill in martial arts history. The man who came to humiliate Elvis Rick Day. The Hammer Morrison was a problem. At 32 years old, he held a third-degree black belt in Kenpo karate and had won multiple regional tournaments. He was skilled, dangerous, and arrogant. Rick had a particular hatred for celebrities who claimed martial arts expertise without earning it. He'd spent 15 years training 6 days a week, breaking his body to master his craft. And then he'd see actors and singers get honorary black belts for publicity, making a mockery of everything he'd worked for. Elvis Presley was, in Rick's mind, the worst offender. Elvis had been photographed in karate uniforms. He incorporated karate moves into his stage performances. He'd been given a black belt by Ed Parker, one of the most respected martial artists in America. But Rick was convinced it was all fake, a publicity stunt. No way could a rock and roll singer be a legitimate martial artist. On August 23, 1974, Rick bought a ticket to Elvis's show at the International Hotel in Las Vegas. He didn't go to enjoy the music. He went to expose Elvis as a fraud. Rick sat in the 5th row, drinking heavily before the show started. By the time Elvis walked on stage, Rick was drunk and belligerent, ready to cause a scene. The challenge that stopped the show. Elvis was 45 minutes into his show, having just finished Suspicious Minds. The crowd was on their feet, screaming. Elvis was sweating, energized, in his element. Then Rick Morrison stood up and shouted, "Elvis, your black belt is fake!" The music stopped. The crowd went silent, confused. Security guards immediately started moving toward Rick's section. "I'm a real martial artist," Rick shouted, slurring slightly. "Third-degree black belt, Kenpo karate. I've trained for 15 years. You're just a singer playing dress-up. Prove you're a real fighter." Elvis held up his hand, stopping security. "Hold on. Let the man speak." Rick was surprised. He'd expected to be thrown out immediately. "You heard me, Presley. Your black belt is bullshit. You've never fought anyone. You've never trained seriously. You're a fake." The challenger thinks he's won, but Elvis hasn't moved yet. The audience was stunned. Some people booed Rick. Others watched nervously, wondering how Elvis would respond. This was a direct public challenge to Elvis's credibility. Elvis walked to the edge of the stage, looking directly at Rick. His face was calm, showing no anger. "What's your name, friend?" "Rick Morrison, and I'm not your friend." "Rick Morrison? Third-degree black belt in Kenpo. That's impressive. Ed Parker's system, right?" Rick was thrown off guard. "Yeah, you know Ed Parker? Ed Parker is my instructor, has been for years. He gave me my black belt after I trained under him for over a decade. But you think it's fake. I think you got it because you're famous, not because you earned it." Elvis nodded slowly. "I understand why you'd think that. A lot of celebrities get honorary belts they didn't earn. It cheapens the art. I'd be angry too if I thought someone was disrespecting something I'd worked so hard for." Rick wasn't expecting understanding. He'd expected defensiveness or anger. "So you admit it's fake?" "No. I'm saying I understand your concern, but you're wrong about me." Elvis turned to his band. "Guys, take a break. This is going to take a few minutes." The demonstrations nobody expected. Elvis removed his cape and his heavy jewelry. He stood at center stage in just his jumpsuit, assuming a fighting stance. Not a performance stance, a real martial arts stance. Feet positioned correctly, weight distributed properly, hands up, guarding. "Rick, if you truly believe I'm a fraud, come up here. I'll show you what I know. No tricks, no performance, just technique." Rick hesitated. This wasn't what he'd planned. He'd wanted to embarrass Elvis, not actually fight him, but he was trapped by his own challenge. If he backed down now, he'd look like a coward. Rick climbed onto the stage, stumbling slightly from the alcohol. He was 6 feet tall, 190 pounds of muscle. Elvis was heavier now than in his younger years, his body showing the effects of prescription medications and an unhealthy lifestyle. On paper, Rick had every physical advantage. Security guards tensed, ready to intervene if things got violent. The audience held their breath. This could go very wrong very quickly. Elvis does something no one expected, especially the challenger. "Rick, I'm not going to fight you," Elvis said calmly. "Fighting isn't what martial arts is about. It's about discipline, control, and respect. I'm going to demonstrate some techniques, slowly. No contact, just movement. And you're going to tell this audience whether what I'm doing is real or fake. Deal?" Rick, confused by Elvis's approach, nodded. Elvis began moving, not the exaggerated karate chops he did during performances, real technique, clean, precise movements that any trained martial artist would recognize. He demonstrated a basic striking sequence: punch, block, counter. The movements were sharp, economical, technically sound. His footwork was correct. His breathing was controlled. His form was legitimate. Rick watched, and his expression changed from hostility to surprise. This wasn't a performance. This was real training. Elvis transitioned into more advanced techniques: a sweep, a throw, a joint lock, demonstrated in slow motion so the audience could see the mechanics. Every movement showed years of study and practice. "Rick, you study Kenpo," Elvis said, still moving. "So you know the 8-point blocking system. Watch." Elvis demonstrated all 8 blocks in sequence, each one executed perfectly. Rick's face showed grudging respect. Those blocks were advanced Kenpo technique. You couldn't fake that. You either knew them or you didn't. Elvis stopped and faced Rick. "Now you. Show me something. Show this audience what real martial arts looks like." Rick, sobering up from the adrenaline and surprise, demonstrated a kata, a predetermined sequence of movements. His technique was excellent, the movements of someone who'd trained seriously for years. When Rick finished, Elvis started clapping. "That was beautiful, Rick. Really beautiful. You're the real deal. 15 years of training shows in every movement. You should be proud." The audience applauded too, following Elvis's lead. Rick looked confused. He'd come here to humiliate Elvis, and now Elvis was praising him. The lesson in humility. Elvis walked closer to Rick. "Rick, let me tell you about martial arts. The best fighters I've ever met. Ed Parker, Bruce Lee before he died, Chuck Norris. They all taught me the same thing. Martial arts isn't about proving you're better than someone else. It's about mastering yourself. It's about discipline and respect and continuous improvement. You came here tonight because you thought I was disrespecting your art. I understand that. I respect that. You care deeply about karate, and you don't want to see it trivialized. That's honorable. But here's what you need to understand. I've trained seriously for over 15 years. Not for publicity, not for image. Because I love the discipline. I love the philosophy. I love what martial arts has taught me about control and focus and humility. When Ed Parker gave me my black belt, he didn't do it because I'm Elvis Presley. He did it because I put in the work. I trained 6 days a week for years. I studied the philosophy. I earned it the same way you earned yours. You don't have to believe me. But Ed Parker believed me, and if you respect Ed Parker's judgment as a martial artist, then you have to respect his decision to give me that belt. What Elvis says next changes the challenger's entire life. Elvis put his hand on Rick's shoulder. "Rick, you're a talented martial artist, really talented, but you came here tonight with anger in your heart. You wanted to prove something. You wanted to humiliate me. That's not the martial arts way. That's ego. And ego is the enemy of growth. I'm not angry at you. I understand why you doubted me, but I want you to leave here tonight having learned something. Not about karate technique. You already know technique. About humility, about giving people the benefit of the doubt, about respecting someone's journey even if it looks different from yours. You trained in a dojo with other fighters. I trained in private with a master instructor because my schedule and my fame made it impossible to train publicly. Different paths, same dedication, same respect for the art." Rick's eyes were wet. The alcohol was wearing off, and the reality of what he'd done was hitting him. He'd publicly challenged and insulted someone who had just responded with nothing but grace and understanding. "Mr. Presley, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I came here to embarrass you, and you treated me with respect I didn't deserve." Elvis smiled. "You deserved respect because you're a fellow martial artist. We're brothers in that, and brothers sometimes disagree. But we don't let disagreement destroy respect." Elvis turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Morrison, 3rd-degree black belt in Kenpo karate, a skilled martial artist, and I hope, a new friend." The audience gave Rick a standing ovation, not sarcastic applause, genuine appreciation for someone who'd just received a masterclass in humility. Rick and Elvis shook hands. Then, to Rick's surprise, Elvis bowed to him, a deep, respectful martial arts bow. Rick instinctively bowed back. What happened backstage? After the show, Elvis invited Rick backstage. Security had wanted to press charges for disrupting the show, but Elvis refused. "He didn't disrupt anything," Elvis said. "He gave me an opportunity to talk about something I love. That's a gift, not a disruption." In the dressing room, Elvis and Rick sat and talked for over an hour about martial arts philosophy, training methods, and their mutual respect for Ed Parker. "Why didn't you just have security throw me out?" Rick asked. "You had every right. Because I understood where you were coming from, Elvis said. I've seen celebrities get honorary belts they didn't earn. It bothered me too. You were defending something you love. I can't be angry at someone for that. But I was drunk. I was aggressive. I called you a fraud in front of thousands of people. You were hurting. People in pain lash out. I've done it myself. The question isn't whether we make mistakes. It's whether we learn from them. Elvis opened a drawer and pulled out a black belt. Rick, I want you to have something. He handed Rick the belt. It was one of Elvis's personal training belts, worn and frayed from years of use. I can't take this, Rick said. You can, and you will. That belt has over 1,000 hours of training soaked into it. Every time you wear it, I want you to remember tonight. Not the part where you challenged me, the part where we turned conflict into respect. That's the martial arts way. That's what Ed Parker taught me. That's what I'm passing on to you. The phone call to Ed Parker. The next day, Elvis called Ed Parker. Ed, I need to tell you about something that happened last night. Elvis described the entire incident, the challenge, the demonstration, the conversation afterward. Ed Parker listened, then laughed. Elvis, you just gave that man the most important martial arts lesson he'll ever receive. You showed him what it means to turn an enemy into a brother. That's advanced black belt philosophy. Most people never learn that. He's a good fighter, Ed, really talented, but he was carrying anger. And now he's carrying one of your belts and a lesson in humility. You taught him that strength isn't about defeating opponents. It's about transforming them. That's mastery. 20 years later, the challenger reveals what Elvis whispered to him. In 1994, 20 years after that night in Las Vegas, Rick Morrison was interviewed for a martial arts documentary. He was now a respected instructor with his own dojo, teaching the philosophy of martial arts as much as the technique. The interviewer asked about the most important moment in his martial arts journey. August 23, 1974, Rick said without hesitation, the night I challenged Elvis Presley. Rick told the whole story. The challenge, the demonstration, the grace Elvis had shown him. Then he revealed something he'd never told anyone publicly. When Elvis hugged me before I left that night, he whispered something in my ear, 7 words that changed my entire approach to martial arts and to life. The interviewer leaned forward. What did he say? Rick's eyes filled with tears. He said, "Strength is knowing when not to fight." That's it. 7 words. But they contain everything you need to know about being a true martial artist, about being a true human being. I'd spent 15 years training to win fights. Elvis taught me in 4 minutes that the real victory is avoiding them. He could have humiliated me, could have had me arrested, could have responded with ego and anger. Instead, he responded with wisdom and compassion. He showed me what a black belt really means. It's not about what you can do to others. It's about what you can do for them. The impact on Rick's life. Rick Morrison completely changed his approach to martial arts after that night. He opened a dojo in Los Angeles that emphasized philosophy and discipline over competition and aggression. Above the entrance to his dojo, Rick hung a sign, "Strength is knowing when not to fight, Elvis Presley." He also hung a photo of himself and Elvis on stage that night, shaking hands. Below it was the worn belt Elvis had given him, displayed in a glass case. Every student who joins my dojo hears the story of that night, Rick said in a 2005 interview. I tell them how I went to Las Vegas drunk and angry, ready to humiliate someone I'd never even met. And I tell them how Elvis turned my aggression into a teaching moment, not just for me, but for 2,000 people watching. He could have destroyed me. Instead, he elevated me. He saw past my anger to the hurt underneath. He understood that I was lashing out because I felt my art was being disrespected. And instead of punishing me for that, he showed me respect. He validated my concerns while teaching me a better way to handle them. That's the kind of martial artist I want to be. That's the kind of teacher I want to be. That's the kind of human being I want to be. Over 40 years of teaching, Rick trained over 3,000 students. He became known not for producing champions, though many of his students competed successfully, but for producing people of character, people who understood that martial arts was about more than fighting. Elvis wasn't the most technically skilled martial artist, Rick said. There were better fighters, faster, stronger, more decorated. But Elvis understood something that most martial artists never grasp. He understood that the highest level of mastery isn't physical, it's spiritual. It's the ability to defeat an opponent without fighting them, to turn an enemy into a friend, to respond to aggression with wisdom. That night, I was ready for a fight. Elvis gave me a philosophy lesson instead, and that lesson has shaped everything I've done since. What Ed Parker, Elvis's instructor and the founder of American Kenpo karate, often told the story of Elvis and Rick to his own students. Elvis called me the next day to tell me what happened, Ed said in a 1980 interview. He was worried he'd done something wrong by engaging with a heckler instead of ignoring him. I told him, Elvis, you just demonstrated the highest level of martial arts mastery. You took a hostile situation and transformed it through wisdom and compassion. Most black belts never learn to do that. Elvis had a gift for understanding people. He could see past the surface aggression to the hurt underneath. That drunk man who challenged him wasn't really angry at Elvis. He was angry at a world that seemed to reward fame over hard work. Elvis understood that. So instead of fighting, he listened. He validated. He taught. That's what a true master does. A true master doesn't need to prove anything. They're secure enough in their own ability that they can respond to challenges with wisdom instead of ego. Ed Parker often said that Elvis was one of his best students, not because of physical skill, but because of understanding. Elvis got it, Ed would say. He understood that martial arts is ultimately about peace, not violence, about building up, not tearing down. That understanding is rare, it's precious, and Elvis had it. Documentary that followed. In 1995, a documentary called The Martial Artist Elvis Presley was released, exploring Elvis's serious commitment to karate. The documentary featured interviews with Ed Parker, Chuck Norris, and other martial artists who'd trained with Elvis. But the centerpiece of the documentary was the Rick Morrison story. Rick provided detailed testimony about that night, and the filmmakers tracked down several audience members who'd been there and still remembered it vividly. One audience member said, I went to that show expecting music and entertainment. I got a philosophy lesson that changed how I think about conflict. Watching Elvis turn that angry drunk into a respectful student was more impressive than any song or dance move could ever be. Another said, what struck me was Elvis's complete lack of ego. This man could have destroyed that heckler, could have humiliated him, had him arrested, made an example of him. Instead, Elvis treated him like a peer, like someone worth respecting and teaching. That generosity of spirit is rare. The documentary also showed footage of Rick's dojo, where he was teaching the philosophy Elvis had taught him. His students were learning not just to fight, but to think, not just to defend themselves physically, but to defend their character and integrity through wisdom. Elvis's legacy in martial arts isn't about his technique, the documentary concluded. It's about his philosophy. He showed that the highest level of mastery is the ability to transform enemies into friends, to respond to aggression with understanding, to see past the surface to the hurt underneath. That's the lesson Elvis taught Rick Morrison, and it's the lesson Rick has spent 40 years teaching others. Have you ever had someone respond to your anger with grace instead of matching your aggression? Someone who saw past your hostility to the hurt underneath? How did that change you? Share in the comments. Sometimes the most powerful response to conflict is understanding, what the martial arts community said. After the story of Elvis and Rick became widely known, many in the martial arts community began to reevaluate Elvis's credentials. Initially, some had dismissed Elvis's black belt as a publicity stunt, just as Rick had. But the more they learned about his training, his philosophy, and his approach to conflict, the more they realized he'd been the real deal. Chuck Norris, who'd trained with Elvis and become a close friend, said, Elvis was legitimately skilled. He trained seriously, studied deeply, and understood the philosophy. But more than that, he lived the philosophy. That's what separates a martial artist from someone who just knows martial arts techniques. Elvis lived the principles of discipline, respect, and humility. That made him a true martial artist, regardless of his belt rank. Other martial artists who'd known Elvis echoed this sentiment. Mike Stone, Priscilla Presley's boyfriend after her divorce from Elvis and himself a champion martial artist, said, I saw Elvis train. He was dedicated, he worked hard, and he got the philosophy in a way that a lot of tournament champions don't. Elvis understood that martial arts isn't about dominating others. It's about mastering yourself. The story of Elvis and Rick became a teaching tool in martial arts schools around the world. Instructors would tell the story to students who were becoming too focused on fighting, too aggressive, too ego-driven. Remember Elvis and Rick, they'd say. The highest level of skill is knowing when not to fight. The belt that hangs in a museum. The belt Elvis gave Rick Morrison is now displayed in the Ed Parker Kenpo Museum in California. Rick donated it in 2010, saying, This belt doesn't belong in my private collection. It belongs to the martial arts community. It represents everything Ed Parker taught and everything Elvis embodied. Future generations should be able to see it and learn from it. The museum display includes the belt, photos from that night in 1974, and a video interview with Rick telling the full story. Thousands of visitors have seen the display since it opened, and many have said it changed their understanding of what martial arts is really about. One visitor wrote in the museum's guest book, "I came here expecting to see trophies and medals and evidence of physical dominance. Instead, I learned about humility, wisdom, and transformation. That worn belt represents more victories than any competition trophy ever could. It represents the victory of understanding over ego, wisdom over aggression, and love over hate." August 23, 1974, a drunk martial artist publicly challenged Elvis to prove his credentials were real. Elvis could have ignored him, could have had him thrown out, could have responded with anger or ego or defensiveness. Instead, Elvis saw an opportunity to teach, to transform, to turn an enemy into a friend. Elvis demonstrated his skill without being boastful. He praised Rick's technique without being patronizing. He understood Rick's anger without excusing his behavior. He offered wisdom without being preachy. And he turned a hostile confrontation into a moment of connection and growth. That's mastery. Not just martial arts mastery, but human mastery. How often do we respond to challenges with ego instead of wisdom? How often do we meet aggression with more aggression? How often do we miss opportunities to transform enemies into friends because we're too focused on defending ourselves or proving we're right? Elvis showed us a better way. When someone attacks you, see their pain. When someone challenges you, understand their fear. When someone tries to humiliate you, respond with dignity and grace. Strength isn't about winning fights. It's about knowing when not to fight. It's about having the skill to destroy but choosing to build instead. It's about seeing past the surface to the hurt underneath and responding with healing rather than harm. Rick Morrison went to Las Vegas to expose Elvis as a fraud. He left having learned the most important lesson of his martial arts career, not a lesson about technique or competition, but a lesson about humanity. Elvis turned an angry drunk into a humble student in 4 minutes, not through force or humiliation, but through respect and wisdom. That's real power. That's real strength. That's real mastery. We all face our Rick Morrison moments, times when someone challenges us, insults us, tries to make us look bad. The question is, how will we respond? Will we match their aggression? Or will we respond the way Elvis did, with grace and wisdom and the understanding that hurt people hurt people? Rick spent 40 years teaching the lesson Elvis taught him that night. Strength is knowing when not to fight. That lesson is as relevant today as it was in 1974, maybe more so. In a world full of conflict and division, we need more people who understand that the highest form of strength is the ability to transform enemies into friends. Elvis could have won that confrontation through force. Instead, he won it through wisdom. And in doing so, he changed a life, inspired thousands of students, and showed the world what true martial arts mastery looks like. Not the ability to break boards or win tournaments, the ability to break down walls and win hearts. That's the lesson. That's the legacy. That's what Elvis taught us all on that Las Vegas stage in 1974. The next time someone challenges you or attacks you, will you respond with aggression or with wisdom? Will you try to win the fight, or will you try to transform the relationship? Share in the comments what you'll do differently after hearing this story. Subscribe to Elvis Presley Legacy Stories to discover more moments that prove real strength is knowing when not to use it. Share this story with someone studying martial arts or someone who works in conflict resolution. This is what mastery actually looks like. And remember, strength is knowing when not to fight. That's the lesson Elvis taught Rick. That's the lesson Rick taught thousands of students. Now, it's the lesson we can all carry forward, because the world doesn't need more people who know how to fight. It needs more people who know when not to. It needs more people who can turn enemies into friends through wisdom and grace. Be that person. Be like Elvis on that Las Vegas stage. See past the aggression to the hurt. Respond to challenges with understanding. Turn conflict into connection. That's real power. That's real strength. That's real mastery.